Kansas City. I'm Serenity, and today we have poet David Arnold Hughes. How you doing, David?
I'm doing good, Serenity. I'm happy to finally be here.
I know. I've been trying to get you in for a little bit now.
Yeah, I know we talked about it a little bit last year, but both of us were off on our own trajectories, and it's taken a long time to get together, but I'm really happy to be here.
So tell us, you have an interesting start as to how you got into poetry. You got into it a little later in life. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I really as a kid, and the poetry I read as a kid was not like what I write. I loved to read things like Kipling and Longfellow and Thomas Babington Macaulay and things of that nature. And so I guess I should be looking through the camera, shouldn't I? I'm not used to being interviewed. But anyway, that kind of turned into writing a little poetry. But really, coming from a poor background and everything, I had to go to work at 18 and make a living. So I didn't really have time to devote a lot to poetry. I devoted my time to a career and things of that nature. And then finally, in my early 50s there, I was able to take some time off that and really bring my poetry out to the people. Start reading it in coffee shops or at the Writer's Place was the first place I read it, bars, wherever they'd let a poet read. And
Right.
So that's when I became known as the poet David Arnold Hughes, and that's been about 13 years that I've been running around the streets of this city reading my poetry.
So that's your government name, right? That's not like a stage name or
That's
anything
my
like
real
that.
name, David Arnold Hughes. And
Right.
the very first poem I ever had published was, oh gosh, 40 years ago, and I had it published under the name of D. Arnold Hughes, which sounds kind of cool, and sometimes I wish I'd stuck with that, but then I don't want people calling me D. Arnold either, so I just started using David Hughes, but that's a fairly common name. In fact, there's another poet in this town, goes to the name of King David sometime, David Hughes.
Oh,
Young
okay.
black man, Priest Hughes' son. And he's David Hughes, so,
Oh,
and then
okay.
the fellow, I kept getting confused with the fellow that was head of the Charlotte Street Foundation, whose name was David Hughes as well, so I decided, well, hey, I'm going to use my middle name, David Arnold Hughes. So it distinguishes me from all the others.
Right. So what did you do as far as like your work besides poetry? Were you in construction or just what you?
No, I was a firefighter that was my career. I mean, for the
Oh,
first 10
okay.
years of my life, from 18 to about 27, I went from job to job like most young people do, but I got with the Kansas City Fire Department then, and I
I don't
spent
know where I came up with construction.
I spent a 26-year career on the Kansas City Fire Department. I was
Oh, wow.
I spent about the last 12 years. I was a captain on a line company, and I spent well, actually the last two I was the lead instructor down at the Kansas City Fire Academy. But
Wow.
once I got all of that, what I really wanted to be was a poet, so I left that behind
That's-
for poetry.
That's definitely a different contrast, being a firefighter to writing poetry.
Well, all kinds of people write poetry. There's
That's
a
true.
lot of cowboys write poetry, for instance, so I don't think it's so incongruent for firefighters to write poetry either.
So, who would you say inspires you as far as poetry is concerned? Like, who are some people, dead or living, that you would read their stuff and you're just like, oh, yeah.
Okay, well, I was trying to think of a few names a while ago, and like I say, I like the old balladeers. Like I read a lot of Kipling, Service. I mentioned Thomas Babington Macaulay, who isn't real well known, but he
Yeah, what's
wrote
his name again?
Thomas Babington Macaulay, and he wrote a poem, Horatius at the Bridge, which I read a lot as a kid, and I think that really inspired me not just to write poetry, but to be what, but just to be what a man should be, really. He's got those lines in there where an upspoke, brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, said of every man upon this earth, death cometh sooner or late.
That almost sounds like Invictus. Have you heard of Invictus?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's
How
one of
can
my
man
favorite.
die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers or the
Right.
temples of his gods? And that's the kind of thing I
I
read
always
as a
like
kid.
your voice whenever you do poetry. You sound so.
Everybody goes on about my voice.
Yeah, your voice.
And I've had a couple of MCs say, this guy is something like a cowboy poet, but although I don't ever write about horses. And well, Glenn North, yes, he told him a couple times that I was something like Johnny Cash. And
Yes, you do
last
have
time,
like it sounds like it's like
teased
that
him.
cool.
I told him last time.
Like a musician type of voice.
Yeah, I said, I'll tell you the truth, Glenn. I said, I've been going for Bob Dylan, but I'll settle for Johnny Cash, okay?
So most of your work has been published. Like you don't do a lot of spoken word. You do
I
more
don't.
reading and.
I do more reading. A lot of my stuff hasn't been published. I've had a couple of books. The one that's in print right now is called "The Sound That Time Makes," and it's through iUniverse.
Oh,
And
okay.
you can buy them over at Prospero's, but there's not very many places in town. But you can buy them anywhere online or at any bookstore. Just give them the name David Arnold Hughes, Sound Time Makes, and if anybody wants to see, some of my poetry in print, they can either go to that website or if you.
What website?
Well, it's
again?
iUniverse.
iUniverse.
But I'll tell you one I would recommend is just go to Google and put David Arnold Hughes Dark Lady Poetry. That's
I think I've heard that
That's a
poem before.
poetry journal out in, well, that's not a poem, that's a poetry journal out in LA, but they published about 3 of my poems and they're all available online through their site, so that's
What advice would you give to a poet who's trying to get some of their work published in publications?
in publications. Well, I would tell them to go down and invest about $30 on a Poet's Guide. It's put out by Writer's Digest, and it gives you a list of journals, contests, everything. Comes out every year, and it'll give you the submission guidelines, whether they want it submitted by hard copy, whether they want it submitted by email in the body of an email, or whether they want it as an attachment, and you can find out the editor's name and whether they pay any money for poetry. That'd be good. But as far as locally concerned, I mean, there's several good local journals around here, like I-70 Review, Thorny Locust, and Coal City Review are
I've
three.
heard of the I-70 review.
Yeah, it's they put out a pretty nice book, and they just had a reading at Writer's Place. And just send your poems in, follow the guidelines, send your poems in. But if they don't get picked to publish, that doesn't really mean anything, because there are a lot of good poems written every day in this country. And you send them to an editor, one editor might not understand it. You send it to another, they might love it. And usually if they try to edit my work, I don't use them. Usually let them edit. I just got one back from a publisher recently, said, well, we like this poem, but we took the liberty of editing it, and we wonder if you would mind if we published it in this version. When I read their version, I'm like, heck, they didn't even understand the poem. They're not good. So I said, no, you may not publish it.
It pretty much changes the whole poem when you do that. So you host Blue Mondays. Tell us a little bit about Blue Mondays and how long you've been hosting that.
Well, I've been hosting that for about 4 years. It's at the Uptown Arts Bar, 3611 Broadway, and it's on the second Monday of each month. And we've got a tight time frame, 8 to 10. And I usually start it pretty promptly, right after 8,
pretty promptly.
because I have to turn that mic over to the stand-up comedians at 10. So, but we have some really good readers there. We start with an open mic, and then each month I have a feature. The feature gets 20 minutes, and I pay the feature $50 for that feature. And then after the feature comes on about 9, and then we go back to open mic for the rest of the night. And we just finished Blue Monday last night, and I had a fellow named Brandon Whitehead, who is an excellent writer, but he just had his first book published, but he's been reading around town for a long time. And I get different people. I've gotten people from St. Joe. I used to go over to the Blue Room there a lot and scout for features, because it's come to my attention that there are several different orbits of poets around this town.
Right.
And a lot of times, this group's orbiting over here, this group, they seldom run into one another. And some of them, the ones I group, are like the ones that are more attached to academia and the publishing community, the ones I call the academic poets. And then there's a lot of the spoken word poets and a lot of poetry coming up out of the youth, particularly out of the inner cities, which is exactly where, louder than bombs. That's exactly where the rock and roll and jazz and blues always comes up, from the inner cities and place. And so even though I don't write that kind of poetry, I've tried to be supportive of those young people. And I'm amazed at the fact that when I was a kid in school, if you wrote poetry, you were some nerd. But now you could be a cool guy and write poetry. I mean, we packed. It was standing room only at the gym theater to hear high school kids read poetry.
Oh,
and
yeah. Some of the
schools,
high school kids are really good.
They are, and I mean, I could critique their work all day, because they don't have a lot to write about. So a lot of times they write about their own personal angst and their own personal experience. And I think as this group of poets matures, though, they will begin to write about more abstract things in their own personal experience. But sometimes they blow my mind. I hear some 19-year-old kid read something, and I'm thinking, oh my God, how could could a 19-year-old kid possibly, write something that deep? So I'm really happy to see that. And I had recently had an opportunity to go talk to some fourth graders up at Ravenwood Elementary School in North Kansas City. Emily Callahan was the teacher who organized this. And she is into poetry, and I spoke to all three of the classes, but it was amazing. These fourth graders were just all over it. I had sent them a copy of a poem ahead of time so they could do it. They had it posted in their little poetry thing, and they had written notes on it and questions, and they had good questions like, I see you use a lot of personification in this poem, is that your style? And when I said things like, some of you guys are going to grow up to be poets, they were throwing their hand, me, I'm going to grow up to be a poet, I'm like, wow, I had no idea there was such passion for poetry among the fourth graders, and when I left there, it was like they were all very attentive. They were interested in the subject, and I'm like, well, I'm not so sure about the rest of society, but I'll tell you, up to fourth grade level, it looks to me like they're doing pretty well. So I'm just really glad to see that interest in poetry among the youth, because every few years somebody writes an article about how poetry is dead. Poetry hadn't died yet. And
I was saying that when I was emceeing an event not that long ago. I brought that up, and I was like, no, it's not dead. We couldn't show you why it's not dead, so it was into that. But Jumpstart Art.
Okay, I was going to say, can I tell you about
you got your
this?
CD.
Here is a CD, and I do have there's about 3 poems by me on here. I'm not the only one by any man. Sharon Eicher, if you know Sharon Eicher.
Lift that up so
Okay, she is got poems. Janie Harris, I don't know if you heard her. Me, Sarah Mingus, Greg Sinak, Kai Zinn, Chloe Wagner, Moshe Noah, I believe, are the poets on here. And
so tell us a little bit about Jumpstart Art.
Okay.
Like, what is it?
Jumpstart Art is a new nonprofit. We started a little over a year ago, and it's designed to help emerging poets make contact with the established, or not poets, but artists of any kind. Like, for instance, if you've got an artist and they paint at home, but they have no idea how to have an art show, well, we got galleries. We can arrange to have them a show, a little opening. They sell maybe a piece of art or two, and get their work out there. If a person writes poetry, but they don't have any idea how to get a chapbook together, we may be able to connect them with the right people to help, or maybe once or twice a year, we'll even put a chapbook together with them. And we've got a fellow right now who we're working on a book for. Also, instruments. If, Sharon was telling us about a guy she ran into, and he said, man, I used to play the trumpet back in high school, but I'd like to get back into that, but I don't have a trumpet. So we're trying to find people that maybe have instruments that are not used, that can be refurbished. Really at the basic level. We're not going to spend thousands of dollars on anybody because we've not got that money to spend, but it's a very basic level of connecting emerging writers, poets, artists, dancers, whoever. We'll try to help them if we can. So this is part of a fundraiser that we made with poetry, and we had a CD released last week. So these go for $10 a piece, and it's for a real good cause.
So, what is the long-term goal of Jumpstart Art? You guys eventually going to start having events regularly? Like, what are you going to do with that?
Well, right now, like I say, we're not trying to get ahead of ourselves. Okay, we're still in the money raising stage. We've got some money to help a few people. We're putting a chapbook together. We've sponsored a couple of art shows for people. We've also donated a little bit of money to some of these youth programs, but it's all on a small scale. We're not really going to be raising a lot of money for anyone, but there's a group of children that are learning violin, for instance, and we put a little money toward that program to help them. So basically connecting emerging artists with the arts community in general. And we've got a great arts community in this town.
So how would someone get in contact with you if they want to get that CD or have you host something or anything like that?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll give you, first of all, my personal email, which is Amadon2000. That's AMADON 2000, Amadon2000 at Yahoo. And also, if you just Google Jumpstart Art KC, you will find the website for this nonprofit, and you'll be able to either purchase these CDs through it or any of us who are a part of that.
Well, thank you for coming in.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. I hope I wasn't too verbose for you.
I'm Serenity, reminding you to spit your piece, and make sure you check out whatsupkansascity.net.
All right.
I'm IFBB Bikini Pro Cat Williams, and when I'm not working out in the gym, I'm searching the web on Cascade Media and What's Up Kansas City. So make sure you check them out.